All right, we're back. It's been about a week since we left off in the last video, and during that time I went ahead and installed the third valve here. This is the one that's going to control the irrigation for the first 4 or 5 rows of the large center section. So I wanted to get that set in and glued up. From there, I continued the distribution line to a T and then came off of that and went straight north, installing all the pipe in that long trench that goes up toward the house and terminates at the ramp bed where the 4th valve is. So I dug that out and installed that, and that's good to go now. So we got the 3rd and 4th valves installed. That's half of them. Now that run going north, I stubbed out a few T's on either side of it for some runs that we're going to do in a second. But before we do that, I was thinking, let's go ahead and tackle this super long run going to the boysenberries, because there's a few things along the way that I want to show you that are a little bit special or unique to that run. And I'd like to just get that one out of the way because it's such a long run. So I'm gonna go grab some pipe and lay it up to the fence, and when we get to the fence, we'll meet back up. All right, now we're ready to turn west and go underneath the fence. And there's a reason I waited until now to dig this little part out, and that reason is armadillos. If I dig this out and leave it open for weeks or months, they're probably gonna come in and start tearing up the garden. In a second, I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do to prevent that. But first, let me go ahead and dig this out. Now, this fence has concrete at the bottom, so I'm gonna have to go under that. I don't think it's super deep, hopefully not. But I'm gonna dig under that, and then we'll talk about what we're gonna do. All right, we've cleaned a hole under the fence. Of course, there would be a big old root here, but that's how it goes, I guess. The first thing we need to do is remember that we're putting a hose bib here. So we're gonna have a 3/4 inch riser. This is 1 inch, and then this is 3/4. So we're gonna put this somewhere here and let that 3/4 inch come up and strap somehow to the fence. And that's gonna be our hose bib. And the 1 inch is gonna continue on to the boysenberries. So I'm gonna measure that. I don't think this is long enough, nope. Maybe something like that. Now, a comfortable height for me for a hose bib is about 30 inches from the ground. So I need my piece of 3/4 to be, this is about, probably about 13 inches. So plus 30 would be 43. So I need a 43 inch piece of 3/4 inch pipe. Go ahead and make that. That's gonna go in there like that. Now I don't know if I like it hitting this concrete right here that's sticking out. I don't know if you can see that. I could break that off. Maybe that's what I'll do. See if I can chip that away a little bit, because I don't really want that concrete rubbing against that PVC like that. Just chip some of that off. That's probably okay. I don't feel it rubbing too much, and we don't have really any tension on the pipe. You don't ever want to get in a position where you're putting a lot of tension on the pipe while it's glued, like twisting it certain ways or contorting it, because it just causes strain on the joints. But I think that's pretty good. Let's see, so we need a piece to continue to the other side. How long does that need to be? I think that's pretty good. We got enough to continue on that. All right, let's glue that up. Okay, so we got the water distribution part installed. Now I'm going to do something here that I haven't done anywhere else yet, and that's use a piece of electrical conduit. And the reason I'm going to do that, remember we have to have a 2-wire cable going to every single valve, which means we have to have a wire going underneath this fence. And the conduit it'll protect it a little bit more. I mean, I don't foresee anything happening to it, but more importantly, with a piece of conduit there, if I ever need to replace that wire or to put a second wire under the fence through here, I don't have to dig out under the fence anymore. I can just push it through the conduit to the other side and leaving this part intact. So I'm going to measure out a piece of conduit to just sit, basically just straddle the fence. Now before I put this in the ground, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish a piece of 20-pound monofilament fishing line through here and leave it sticking out of both ends, so that when we go to put the 2-wire cable for the valve through here, all I have to do is tie it to that fishing line and pull the fishing line out the other end, rather than try to, you know, push the wire through. I mean, this is super short. I don't think I would have any problem pushing a 2-wire cable through this, but it's just a good habit to get into if you're dealing with bigger wire or much longer stretches of wire like we're about to see in a second. So let me do that real quick. All right, the only thing we have left to do is to finish building our hose bib riser. I've got a ball valve that I'm going to put on here so we can shut that off separately if we want to. And then I've got the hose bib to put on top. So let's do that now. Now my original plan, once we got this far, was to backfill the trench under the fence and pack it in so nothing could crawl under there. But looking at the hole, it's pretty small. I mean, I'm sure something like a mouse could get under there, but I'm not really concerned about a mouse. They can just walk through the fence, you know. So I think what I'm gonna do instead is I'm just gonna take some of these red bricks from the house that got destroyed that I dug up recently when I was digging these trenches, and just stuff them in there and kind of block the hole up. I mean, it doesn't need to be airtight. I'm just really trying to keep the armadillos out, because if we accidentally leave one of these fence gates open, the armadillos will come in and start digging up everything, like all the perennial beds, and it almost killed that coral honeysuckle over there. I was able to save it, but I'm trying to avoid that. So I'm just gonna stuff a few of these bricks in there and kind of make it look a little bit less enticing, you know, to try to crawl through. The reason I'm gonna do it this way is because I wanna be able to check this for leaks. Like, we're not gonna pressure test this until we're done with all of the valves and everything, and the hose bibs and all that. So I can't really pressure test it until we do all that. And that's why, another reason I don't wanna cover it up, so I can see that joint in case it's got a slow leak. I mean, I don't think it will, but you never know. So I'm just gonna stuff some bricks in here. Nothing's crawling through that. All right, now let's jump to the other side of the fence. I'll glue the pipe going down to the dip, and once we get to the dip, we'll talk some more. Okay, so we got the hose bib installed and the valve ready to go. Now there's one more thing I want to do before we head back up to the main garden. I'm going to do the same thing here that I did when we went under the fence, which is I'm going to put conduit, electrical conduit, in the bottom of this dip. And the reason I'm going to do that is the same as under the fence. I don't ever want to have to dig this mucky soil up. I mean, this is the bottom of the slope, so it's usually super wet. It's actually not that bad right now because we've been in a little bit of a dry spell, but normally it's super wet soil and you don't really want to dig that up. By putting this conduit in there, if I ever need to replace this wire or pull a second wire through, I'll be able to just dig the ends out and find that conduit and then push it through the conduit. So I'm going to glue these sticks of conduit together, put a fishing line through it like we did before, and then lay that in the dip before we head back up there. All right, we got everything down here set up and ready to run the wire in a future video. Now let's head back up to the main garden and continue installing the distribution line. You know, I was dreading digging this next trench because it's right next to this giant southern live oak, and I knew that as I got closer to it, I was going to encounter some pretty substantial roots, and I did. Luckily, I was able to go under most of them. The rule I've been using as far as when to just cut a root out of the way and when to try to go under it is if you can cut it with a pair of hand shears, then you can just cut it. You don't have to worry about it. It's not that important. If it's big enough that you need loppers to cut it, then you might want to think about going around it if you can, but if you really have to cut it, it's not the end of the world for a, you know, an established giant tree like this. However, if the root is so big that you need a sawzall or like an axe or something to get it out of the way, then you don't want to cut it. I would just leave it there and go around it because it's too important for the tree. It's too much of a structural root. So that's pretty much what I've done on all these trenches. That's the rule I've been following. Now, this trench is going to the WaterBox, which we're going to install next. So let's get into that. So this is the WaterBox. It's basically just a pop-up faucet. You put this in flush with the ground, and then when you need to hook up a hose, you pull this up and you connect it right here. It keeps the hose connection hidden, so you don't have to look at it. It's really just for aesthetics. I mean, you could put like a hose bib like we've been doing with those risers for a lot cheaper. I think this was like over $140. I mean, they're very expensive, but if it's in an area where you really care about the aesthetics and you don't want to look at this, or if you need to mow, like a lot of people put these way out in the middle of the yard where you don't want a, you know, a hose big riser sticking up because you have to mow around it or weed eat around it. That's why people use these. I wanted one here just because I kind of like the aesthetics of this area. I got to look at it every day, and also makes it easier to mow right here because it's kind of out in the middle of the yard, less weed eating, you know. So we're going to put this in now. The way we hook it up, it's got a 3/4 female pipe threads connection. So I've got a male pipe threads to go into that, and comes out 3/4 slip on the other side. And then I've got one of those reducing elbows, so that'll go 3/4 to here and then change to 1 inch and go down. And then this will elbow up into that 1 inch with our main line. It's pretty simple. The thing we got to do though is dig out this area just so I can set it in. It's got a little tab here that you pull out to kind of help hold it. Let's see, this thing. See, you kind of pull that out when you go to install it to help it hold in the ground. So we're just going to install it right here. I'll dig out a little hole for it, and then we'll put it in and hook it up. All right, with that taken care of, let's jump over and work on the compost bin valve. I waited to dig this one out because I just wanted to demonstrate how I've been digging these. It's not rocket science, but I thought it might be helpful to see just how I'm doing it. And also, this is the shortest run. I didn't want to, you'd have to sit there and watch me dig like a super long one. So we're gonna dig this out now and then install the run and stub it out, because I don't know how I'm gonna build that compost manifold, but we'll do that later. So the first thing I wanna do is put a little stake on each side of where it, where it needs to start and where it needs to end. I think I want the header to come out right about at the corner of this last bin. So the trench is gonna have to be like that, I guess. Does that make sense? Yeah, it'll be out of the way there. We can come out and go up onto the fence and then come across the top of the fence somehow. So let's put it about right here. Now I'm going to tie a string between the two stakes. Now I'm going to take a can of spray paint and mark the ground directly under that line. The spray paint isn't entirely necessary, but I found I can't really dig a straight enough trench with just the string there, and also the string is constantly in the way. But if you didn't want to buy spray paint, you could just try to line it up with the string and do what we're about to do. So what I'm going to do here is, I've been making these about the width of the shovel. So if I do like this in the center of the line, it's probably about 3 inches on each side. So I'm just going to come about 3 inches this way and go straight down like that. Kind of don't break the shovel, but you can kind of rock it just a little bit to break it up. What we're really doing here is cutting the grass, and then we just continue on keeping the same spacing from the line. Kick it up a little bit. Don't break the shovel though. My soil's pretty sandy, so it's not too bad to move it like that, but if you've got clay or something, or like big rocks, you got to be careful not to break the shovel. Tree roots can mess it up too. You'll know when you hit one. We're just going to go all the way down the line. All right, now we're going to turn around and do the exact same thing on the other side. Now, we've cut the grass, the turf grass, on each side. And there's nothing holding it right here because there's a trench here. So if we take about a shovel's width or so, it don't got to be exact, however much you think you can pick up is really what it is, and we go straight down here through the middle. The first one kind of slides in there, but you see we can take that off. Now I got to think about where I want to throw it. I guess I'll put it on this side. Y'all want to put all your stuff on one side, obviously, to make it easier to work in the trench. If you put it on both sides, it kind of blocks you. Now I'm just going through and taking about a shovel's width straight out like that, all the way down. Now what we're gonna do is take the small shovel and clean it out. You could do this with the big shovel if you want, but I don't know, I just found it was easier to do it with this. Sometimes the big shovel gets stuck in here on like the edge on a root or something. This one's just a lot easier to manage. I've been shooting for a depth of 12 inches. A little bit more to go there. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes a little less, but 12 is what I'm aiming for. It kind of depends on tree roots and debris and stuff like that sometimes. So we uncovered a wire here. I'm fairly certain this is an old wire from the house that got destroyed, but I'm not sure. And whenever you have an unknown wire, you should always assume that it's live so you don't electrocute yourself. So we're just gonna leave it right there. We can easily go under it with the pipe. I nicked it a little bit, but I think it's just the insulation. So we should be okay. We're gonna go under it. There's a fairly sizable root here. I'm gonna try to go under it. Well, not try, I am gonna go under it. I nicked it with a shovel, but it should be okay. See how this smaller shovel comes in handy? You can't really do this so easy with the big shovel. Getting under roots like that. All right, with that out of the way, we can go ahead and install the valve. I'll start by attaching a full stick to our distribution pipe. I'm doing the same thing I've been doing, which is I came back 2 or 3 feet with the valve box from where the header comes out, so we're not crowding it. Just gives more room to work with and everything. Now you might be thinking, man, that's a lot of work. There ain't some kind of machine that can dig these trenches? And there is. There's something called a landscape trencher. It's like it almost looks like a tiller, but you pull it behind you and it's got a big circular blade on it and it just chops a trench in the ground. I think the one I saw can go cut a depth up to like 13 inches or so. But if you remember from the video we did where we built that garden plot right there where the sweet potatoes are now, this ground has so much debris in it from the house that was destroyed by Katrina. I mean, just look at all these red bricks that I dug up from just the spot I'm sitting in right here. This was from the house that was destroyed. It was a red brick. So already I was thinking like, man, I could rent a machine, but a machine like that is gonna get tore up probably on this kind of stuff. And in the end, I'm glad I didn't. And let me show you why. So this is the trench that runs east along the northern edge of the big center plot. We've got 3 valve boxes that go in this plot. This is the lane to one of them. But you can see that we've got a big problem here, and that is the concrete footing for the house that was destroyed. It's a lot more substantial. I was hoping it would just be like, you know, maybe 6 inches of concrete, but it's, you know, at least a foot of concrete, and I didn't get to the bottom of it yet. So it's probably 14 something inches of concrete. And unfortunately, it runs straight along the trench. But if you can see here, this is the edge of it, the northern edge. So this is just regular dirt. So what I'm thinking is Originally my plan was to bust all this out, but now that I see how big it is, that's not gonna happen. So instead, what I think is the best thing to do is just kind of leave this alone. I'm gonna pull the dirt back a little bit that I dug out along this edge, and then I'm gonna dig out along this, the edge of the footing on this side. And if I have to widen the trench a little bit over here, I will, because down there I'm gonna have to. And then we'll lay the pipe in here, right? And then when we get to these valve box T's, I'll bust up the footing just so we can cross them like I've done here. We'll cut the rebar and then just run the pipe here to the valve box, which will be right here somewhere, and then over to the header. So really the only real concrete busting we got to do is, I've already really done this one mostly, but there's one more up there for the third valve box that we'll have to bust up. I've got a machine to do that. But I guess let's start by cleaning out what we can along the edge of the footing so we can see exactly what we need to bust up. And then we'll go and tackle the other valve box. I'll take my angle grinder, cut this rebar, and then we'll try to install the pipe and the valves. That's the game plan anyway. We'll see how it goes. The concrete's starting to flare out here, and it's making digging the trench difficult. So I'm gonna take this concrete breaker and try to chip off these, I think it's just these edges, and I think I can break them off pretty easy. So I'm gonna try to do that now. All right, we're up to the third valve box. So I'm gonna go ahead and start chiseling out this concrete from here in. I think it goes to about right here. So we need to chisel out that much concrete. There's rebar in here too, so that'll be fun. All right, we got down to the rebar, but this rebar it seems further down in the ground, deeper than the one down there, because here we're already at like 13 inches to the top of the rebar. There's really no reason to go below it. So I'm gonna call it good here, and we're like way deep enough here, like 15 inches. So I'm gonna stop busting the concrete because I think we're good enough, and I'm just gonna finish this little part right here, which is just dirt, get it deep enough because the valve box is gonna be right about here. All right, we got it mostly dug out. I just need to try to excavate under this giant root right here. And there's one right there that's not quite as bad. And once we get that done, we can cut that rebar and then finally lay the pipe. So let me see if I can get under this bastard. I feel like a damn archaeologist sometimes doing this. All right, I got through it. So we should be able to go under it. That is a huge root though. That's got to be nearly a foot in diameter. I mean, it's a big tree. So, not completely surprising, but it's definitely the biggest root I've found since I've been doing this. This is the type you definitely don't want to cut. There's one more right here. This one ain't too bad. It's like a root on top of a root. It's just a solid wall of roots right here. 14 inches of roots straight up and down. And I'm trying to decide, I guess I'm just gonna try to go under it all, but that means I'm probably gonna have to dig this out more because the pipe can't, you know, it can bend a little bit, but it's not gonna bend like that crazy. Boy, what a nightmare that turned out to be. I think I've got it underdug enough to get the pipe in. I may need to scoop some more out of these sides so that it's not, so that it's more of a gentle slope. You know, it can't be that much of a bend in it, perhaps, but we'll see when we go to put the pipe in. But I'm under it. I mean, you can see the ruler. Well, you probably can't see that, but we're definitely under it enough. This is like, it's probably like 16 or 17 inches of root. It's like 3 different roots. All of them are massive though, and they're stacked on top of each other, so it's like I couldn't go between them, you know, and I didn't want to cut anything. I mean, even the smallest of these is 4.5 inches, 5 inches in diameter, so that's not a root I want to cut for this giant live oak tree. But anyway, we got one more thing. We need to cut the rebar down there and do that real quick, and then we can finally start laying the pipe in this final section. I'm just gonna tee off right here a short distance and stub up with a 1-inch piece because I don't know how I'm gonna do this marsh grass area yet, but I'm gonna keep it 1 inch. So I just need to dig out just a little bit here so I can come over and come up with an elbow. Whew, all right, believe it or not, we're done with the distribution line. Now I want to let this sit overnight, and we're to come back in the morning and pressure test it all, make sure we don't have any leaks. So I'll see you then. All right, I think we're ready to try this thing. I've done a couple things in preparation. I went to all the outlying hose bibs that we installed, and I hooked a hose up to them with nothing on the end of it and cracked those valves just a little bit so that air, as this water rushes through, it can push that air out of the system. We don't want a whole bunch of air compressed in the pipes. So it just lets the air escape. And the other thing I did was I closed all the solenoid valves manually by turning the solenoid about a quarter turn clockwise. They make a little tool or like a little wrench looking thing you can put on it, but you can also just turn it with your hand. And the reason I did that is because I want to test the stuff, the little bit of plumbing that's downstream of those independently. So they're all closed, and as we walk through and inspect all the rest of the plumbing for leaks, we're going to open those individually and check and make sure they're not leaking too. So let's see what we got. All right, the master valve's open. We've got water flowing through everything. Now let's walk around and check it. All right, I think we're good. I checked all our glue joints and I don't see any leaks anywhere. Two of the solenoids were weeping a little bit from right under the solenoid where it connects to the valve body, and I think that's just, I had them cranked down a little too hard. Sometimes when you're using that wrench, you can over torque them. They really only need to be hand snug because it can mess up that seal a little bit temporarily, but we'll keep an eye on it as we get into the next video, which is gonna be cutting off these caps and attaching our header fittings and headers, they're gonna run across the tops of the rows like this, and that's what we're gonna attach the drip tubing to. So that's what we're gonna get into in the next video, and I hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.